This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
I can't. It's just okay.
I know.
Okay.
Oh my God. Sorry, everybody.
Are we recording?
Yeah, we're recording.
Okay. God damn it. Okay.
God damn it. Okay.
Okay.
And I said I wasn't gonna cuss in this one, and I started with GD. Like, God Almighty. Hello, and welcome to Body Count, the podcast. Shit.
It's true. Okay. This is gonna
We
be
both
interesting.
snorted, and we both. This is gonna be interesting. Ha! Redo. Hello, and welcome to Body Count, the podcast where we believe history doesn't repeat itself. It rhymes, and a proud member of the MSE Podcast Network.
Network.
Our only rule when we choose a topic, someone, or as is usually the case, a lot of someone's died. We give you the series of events in a narrative fashion, and by the end, attempt to correlate said story with current events. Now, I'm not PBS, Kim Burns, or Dan Carlin. However, if you want to Hoover-esque Just the Facts Ma'am History podcast, one, you don't understand very much about the humanities, that is, you don't understand very much about history. All history is biased. All history begins with a hypothesis, and it is up to the historian to prove or disprove their hypothesis with sources. That's how history works when you're not a journalist. BT dubs, but whatever.
That's how you win debates too.
That's how you as well. Well, it's the humanities. It's a combination of arts and science, folks. I'm not here to read shit to you off of a page because I'm in no mood. So I'm telling you this now. If you want a Just the Facts Ma'am History podcast, we're not going to be for you. As the colloquialism states, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out.
Colloquialism.
Colloquialism.
That's a mouthful.
Well, it's just really
mouthful.
It's a pretentious way to say idioms. And you know I'm always going to take the pretentious way out.
Yes,
Colloquialism.
Fucking bad.
Our point is there will be analysis and opinions.
Yeah.
We're not reading names and dates at you. So if you don't love that idea, again, please get out. My opinions are my own. Know that I hold all my co-hosts verbally hostage. So direct your folks, or all you folks, direct your hate at me where it belongs. Don't privately message Bethany Madison or Frank with your hate. This is all me. And I promise you, I'm prepared for it. I have lots of it, if you cannot tell by this very botched intro. Now, I'm your host, Miss Jessica Manor. You can find me under those names on all forms of social media, and I dare you to come at me today. And I'm joined. Come at me, bro. I'm joined by
Bethany Skelton.
Hey, girl. Hey.
I got my first facial done, and I came home, and I was enough to put my son's school stuff away and get him in the shower, and then I was like, I'm tired.
Dude.
So tired. And then I woke up and I think I texted you, and then I woke up again and you're like, I sent you the script. Did you get it? And I'm like, oh fuck. I look at the time, it's 10:30. My kid already went to bed. I'm like, what the fuck just happened?
Well, here am I. No, I completely get it. I had a migraine today. Plus, I am a notorious insomniac. My brain never stops. And, well, it's also my social anxiety. I have to go over every interaction I've had with a human being in the day. I said that. Dang it. Why didn't I say that?
Why did I have to be so fucking awkward?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. And so I don't ever go to sleep. I get maybe 4 hours of sleep. It finally culminated in a massive migraine today and probably borderline Ambien abuse. But
Yeah, we'll just leave that one
we'll
alone.
leave that one alone. I finally passed out for some much deserved sleep. My husband, thank God, went and got my kid from school because I didn't know what was happening. I woke up at like 6 p.m. and I was like, oh, well, I survived it. So that's where we're at. But that is also the understanding
okay.
of the kids under. Okay, that's my welcome to motherhood in real life and not Instagram bullshit or Pinterest bullshit.
Yeah, you bet my ass when I woke up and it was like 10 after 10 o'clock. I was like, fuck. I went right to my son's room and he was already asleep, but I climbed myself. He's got a high bunk bed. I climbed my sorry ass up that stairs and I was like, I love you and all that. And he's like, I love you too.
Exactly.
All
Well,
right.
I finally got woken up by my kid who had been home from school and pried open my eyeball and said, Mom, are you alive?
Mom, are you
Yes.
alive?
Thank you.
No.
I
Here's
am.
the thing about Jessica. Maybe you'll be mad, but I know you don't like the sound of your own voice.
Absolutely
Okay.
hate it.
You are in a lower octave. Like that's just your natural voice. Your daughter, however, is in it's in a high-pitched voice, but it's still in that cute, and she's really tiny. Like, at least in my opinion, she just does this tiny little thing. She's this sweetest little squeaky voice. And mommy, are you alive? I can just totally hear her say that. It is just
Yes. And so sarcasm sounds very, very weird when it has that tiny little voice attached to it because it
I
wasn't,
know.
Mommy, are you alive? It was like, are you alive? It was
Are you
very
alive?
judgy. Yeah.
No, but with the squeakiest and oh my God. And it's not one of those that like is nails on a chalkboard squeaky. You know what I mean? It's just still so freaking cute
Yeah. No, it's super cute. But to be
and
fair,
hilarious.
she's a tiny little person like her mother. We're both Ariana Grande size, so it just
She
is
has
what it is.
she has your God, what's the face that you make when somebody says something stupid.
So
She
the
makes
face I
that
have all the
face
time.
and then she does that whole and she kind of she kind of sits off to the side and looks at you and is like actually, I'm like, but it's in this actually this, and I'm like, God, yes, Raylan, you're right, and I love you, smart ass.
It's all right. You can punch me in the face for her and
Okay,
myself, both.
deal. I'll take you up on that.
Yeah, well, I could take it. It's not anything I'm not unaccustomed to, because God knows I've been punched in the face many times in my life for some of the shit that comes out of my mouth. And rightly
Uh,
so. I do deserve it, but you deserve it for being stupid.
so there.
So there. All right. Before we get to what we're going to get to today, housekeeping. We
Housekeeping.
are part of the MSC Podcast Network, which is an absolutely fantastic collection of podcasts. We're always super excited about that. Please go check them out on social media, everyone. If you love the show, please, please, please go give us those 5 stars on iTunes or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Honestly, you can say whatever the hell you want. You can give us 5 stars and tell us to go suck it. We really don't care. It's not to make us feel good.
Awesome.
It would. I would read that out loud. I really would. I would read it in our counterculture. You can say what you want, but it really helps us out on the business end. If you're a fan of the show, please go give us 5 stars and the review. Also, go check us out on Patreon. We watch and kind of break down and comment our way through a lot of historical dramas for only $1 a month. Recently, we made a foray into historical literature as well with a modern day interpretation of the Midsummer Night's Dream called a vehicle known as Get Over It. It's
was it amazing? I'm so happy we recorded that.
I am too.
We needed that day. We definitely needed it that day.
We desperately needed that day because my mood just continues to sour.
I know.
Madison was going to join us tonight. She had something that held her up in the form of a sick kid, so she will join us next week for the second part because this is getting into a series. We are back into a deep dive. We're happy to announce that we are done with our one-offs. We're getting back into a deep dive, and this one is going to have elements of true crime as well as sort of a new historicism, if you will, of a certain amount of events. But before we get to that, we kind of have to lay our foundation. If you're like me and you're not a fundamentalist Latter-day Saint or a Mormon, a fundamentalist Mormon, and I am not saying shit about the Latter-day Saints. We're getting into fundamentalist Mormonism today. That is what we're having a go at, if you will. I don't care, and I don't want to talk about it, and I'm not here to relive the Book of Mormon. I don't care. That is not the subject matter we're talking about. But it also brings us into the difference between the traditional Latter-day Saints and the FLDS church, which outside of the TLC Sister Wives show, have you ever seen that, Bethany?
Okay, I to be honest, I have seen the drama behind it, but I've never actually watched the show.
I have watched all 13 seasons of that show, and I cannot get enough of it. Oh my God. I'm fascinated.
Maybe it's one of those situations where you're like, I watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and I'm like, why? And you're like,
I'm fascinated.
Just watch it.
It's fascinating.
Like, okay, dude, freaking funny.
No, God, it's my favorite thing in the world. I won't get into the Kardashians, but it's neither here nor there. But as far as Sister Wives, and it's not just Sister Wives. I watch all those polygamy shows because I find it absolutely fascinating. The concept, the rationalization, and I am not here to tell anybody how to live their life. I don't care. To me, it is fascinating. You do you.
You do you, boo-boo.
But I'm not going to pretend it's not fascinating for me to look in for the inside. It absolutely is. And
you know what? With fascination comes actual research, which then becomes into actual knowledge. So having a fascination for something that's different, as regular or as a particular society deems, it's one of those like moments where it's like, yeah, you have a fascination, but then since you're fascinated, you do research, and not because you believe in it, but you want to know, well, why do others believe in it?
Then you have
the knowledge.
That was, and that's very much what drove me, because one, I wanted to do a cult series. Because when I wrap this up, I'm going to talk a lot about, I think, zealotism in these United States of ours. Anybody that gets too jazzed up over anything is dangerous, whether it's abortion, anti-abortion, gay rights, anti-gay rights. It obviously is a very polarizing thing. So to me, I don't want to attack anybody, and let me tell you right now, I can't get enough of those. I can't get enough of those shows, and I've got nothing wrong with Mormonism whatsoever. I just didn't know all that much about it. It's not something that came into my purview in any of my historical studies. I mean, if it was on my radar, it was loosely on my radar in the settlement of the West, which is not really my specialization. My specialization tends to be 20th century history and perspective. So I didn't know that much about any of it going in. So save your fucking DMs. I am not in any mood. I don't want to know. I don't want to be educated. But I feel like going into the story, before we get to the events proper and before we start to really look at the cult within the religion that we're going to be covering.
Because that's what it is. It's a cult. Like,
it's a cult
exactly
within a legitimate religion. So that made it even more interesting to me, because I could have talked about Jonestown. I could have talked about all of that, but I don't find it as fascinating because I feel like a lot of these right-wing groups that we see today are actually cults within religions, which I find fascinating. And I wanted to look at it from the outside. So before we get into it, I feel like I have to educate all of us on some things, about the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the fact that they are very different from the LDS Church proper.
Okay.
It's important to the story we're telling, and we're talking about like compound people, FDLS, not like sister wives, not people that mainstream and are just normal humans living a polygamous lifestyle or something like that. We're talking about, like, did you ever see the HBO vehicle Big Love?
No.
With Bill Paxton? Okay. Because what we're going to be talking about as far as FLDS, as far as Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, is going to be a lot more like Nikki's parents in Big Love. A lot more of that compound style, really traditionalist, really removed, where corruption tends to thrive when you separate yourself from society, kind of Latter-day
like
Fundamentalist Mormons.
Separating yourself from not reality, but the technology, and like cutting yourself fully off from the world.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much that's exactly what they do. So first and foremost, as we get into our subject matter, LDS, Latter-day Saints, traditional church proper Mormons are not polygamous. I know that everybody makes that joke.
And polygamous is just having multiple wives.
Correct. But fundamentalist Mormons very much are. That is the primary separation, is plural
LDS,
marriage.
Not plural marriage. FDLS,
plural marriage. Yes. So again, plural marriage is, in essence, it means taking more than one wife, and that can mean anything from 2 to like 80 plus wives. Plural, Now, plural marriage in and of itself was made illegal in the United States in 1862, and it was banned by the Mormon Church in 1890. And I'm gonna say, no, it's not the government's business who you marry and who you love and how many people, but we also have to look at it from a taxable point of view. In my mindset, you can't have 27 dependents, own a small business, make $2 million a year in profit. Well, then you've got 27 plus 4. Let's say you just have 4 wives. Look how many dependents. It's not a taxable situation. So to me, when people are always it's not so much about the morality that people object. It's about taxability. And it's, because everybody would do that. Everybody would just start claiming people that aren't their way. I would tomorrow find 3 other single women to pretend to be married to my husband if it got me a bigger tax write-off in our tax bracket. I straight up would.
I mean, they were onto something here.
I mean, in essence, kind of. But
I never thought I'd actually be for polygamy until just then.
I'm not for somebody else banging my husband, but I sure as shit am there for the write-off. If I can just find a single mom to claim on my income tax, I'll do it tomorrow. That, and I want to make that, everybody always, that's a constant question that I see in these forums as I've been researching this, and I have been doing this for about a month and a half. I don't think it's that the United States government objects to who loves who. I think it's the United States government objects to what is claimable on an income tax return. I mean, because I would do that. So it's a legitimate theory there for me, but we're also going to do a little walk through here, some very, very basic Mormon history. I am not here to get into the history of the Mormon church. That's a different fucking podcast altogether. And I'm not going to do it. There's a book I'll be plugging at the end of this about somebody that does LDS church history and everything that goes along with it proper. I'm not interested. I'm here because it's going to be kind of necessary going forward and understanding our actual subject matter that we are going to get to in this deep dive. So pretty much like, yeah, I know I'm just like deep throating a gun and asking for it here, but it has to be done. It has to be done. I see no other way to avoid it. And to get in the mind space of our subject and his basically cult, because it's not even proper fundamentalist Mormonism, we're going to have to do it. There's no other way around it.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's just like we said before, I know it's a touchy subject and I know people are going to have their opinions, but we're going to look at one aspect of it and just go from there.
Exactly. So
again, this is a great time to, if this is something you're like, nope, I don't want to go into this. This is a time to pause and then maybe wait a few weeks until our deep dive of this is over.
Until we're over and you see where we're going.
Go back and listen to some other episodes that we
encourage you to do it.
Or go to our Patreon where you can not experience any of this.
And we don't edit anything, and we are total idiots, and I don't talk about history at all. We just are funny. That's all we do there.
So, this is a perfect time to bow out gracefully if that's your choosing. If not, welcome to getting educated, because I had to get myself educated before we started this as well. So
yes,
here
last disclaimer. We do not want to offend any of you LDS Mormons out there. We're not trying to do that.
We're looking at a particular situation that unfortunately used the Mormon
religion
as a scapegoat.
As a scapegoat to be a cult. Exactly. And again, please give us, we're not trying to give you an in-depth deep dive. We're just going to run through this as quickly as we can, a very basic background on what we're trying to get to, which is going to be polygamy and fundamental Mormonism. So, in 1843, Joseph Smith made polygamy a sacred commandment of the Mormon Church.
Oh, God, this is exactly... Oh, shit. Okay, here we go. Sorry.
Bethany?
Oh, fuck.
We did not just do 15 minutes of disclaimer for you to laugh at that.
I'm sorry. Oh, my God. Okay, here we go. Sacred commandment.
Sacred commandment of the Mormon Church based on the biblical multiply and replenish the earth.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So, boy, we did not do a good job of not being dicks right there. So also, biblical prophets had multiple wives. And I am not going to go into Judeo and Proto-Judeo history and why that is the thing it is. I'm not, that's also a different podcast that I don't have time for.
Another bag of dicks.
It's a different bag of history dicks. That's going to be our new saying. # different bag of history dicks. Of course, I think this is largely BS because Joseph Smith loved to smash, supposedly. And like maybe this prompted his whole polygamy quote unquote revelation. God, please don't hate me, Latter-day Saints folks. I'm just calling it like I see it. And there are some worldly reasons for this horse hockey. I mean, am I right, Bethany?
Am I right? Yes.
Can I just say, have a freaking mistress. It is, my God, just as long, just bang who you want to bang in life, people. Let's not get a marriage certificate attached to it. Good Lord. Now, the converts to the newly formed Mormon religion were from very Puritan households, and it's estimated that not a lot of early Mormons were super into the polygamy idea. that they ever were. Imagine that. Who wants to have 4 women fighting constantly because they're married to the same man? Now,
synced up.
Oh, this is why you have to watch Sister Wives, yo. Like, you just have to watch it. It's amazing. So, even Brigham Young bitched about the idea at first.
Mm-hmm.
But he got over it pretty quickly, though, when he went tits deep into 27 wives himself and concluded polygamy was and this is a quote, polygamy was a noble practice that kept women chaste and helped rid society of prostitution.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Sounds like The Handmaid's Tale, like literally in one sentence.
Right now, can we say, sex workers of the world, we're in solidarity with you, babies. Like, you do you. You don't have to marry a man with 26 other wives. Like, it.
Yeah. And you know those girls are making 6 figures a year, if not more.
My God, like, I'm not going to make oh my God, the joke I just had in my head. This is why I'm not going to say it. This is why we have editors, and this is why we try not to we cut a lot of the things that we say out of this show for the most part. So, the early church, it was under some serious scrutiny and constant attack, as you can imagine. And polygamy was also, bottom line, a practical way to increase early church membership very quickly. And again, because you've already got these people, I don't want to use brainwashed. That is not a nice term. But no, there's not another term for it. I mean, because they're already ready-made, tiny little polygamous Mormons, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So again, it's pretty pragmatic to me for a quote-unquote spiritual request. But que sera, sera, you know what I'm saying? Like,
whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see.
Exactly.
Sera, sera.
To be fair, it was a practical way to grant. And remember, this is 1800s America, guys. So times were tough for women, and there wasn't a lot of recourse for a woman without a man. It was a practical way from everyone from spinsters to widows to have some form of security within society, sadly as that may be.
Not much has changed. I mean, going from a single mother, singlehood to single motherhood for so long before I finally got married, I'm telling you, life is way simpler with a man at your side, because why? Society just deems that to be
exactly so
correct. And so I'm not gonna lie to you, think better insurance,
before we decry it, you also have to think about that 1862 to 1890. Like, if you were going to be destitute as a widow or an unmarried woman that wasn't married, you only were going to live to 60 anyway. Like, by the time you're 30, half your life's got, like, it is a legitimate way to grant multiple women a way to navigate society, sadly enough.
Which is sad, like you just said, sadly
enough. But you also have to see why a lot of people saw this
as an opportunity.
Positive thing, as an opportunity. I get it. Again, I am not denouncing anything. I get it. It's fascinating to me. I don't subscribe to it, though. Now, at this time, the United States government is prosecuting the hell out of polygamists and dropping that bit about polygamy from the church doctrine was actually condition of Utah becoming a state. So dropping polygamy makes Utah become a state in the eyes of the United States government, because they were tired of messing with it. And a lot of people say it's because, it doesn't conform into the Puritan lifestyle that settled this country, yada, yada, yada. I don't think that's it. It's not a taxable reality.
Right.
It just isn't.
So it's
it just isn't.
Yeah.
Think about that.
I get
If you
it.
can claim all
Get
your
it.
dependents, you can claim your wife if they don't work. If you have 27 freaking wives and make $2
That
million
don't work.
a year, you're still
Mhm.
getting money back from the United States government. So that's
Yeah.
not exactly fair.
Yeah.
Is it? Because then you can just pick up people that you're not. It's kind of the same way that you don't get citizenship by marrying a United States citizen anymore. You
Right.
know, it
Yeah.
just,
You have to go through a bunch of different things
like it or
in
not, a
order.
government does
Yeah.
have to be practical. So, knowing that that's a condition of Utah becoming a state, surprise, surprise, the then president of the church has a miraculous quote vision from the Lord
Oh,
saying,
fuck.
always, always, saying that polygamy was now a Church of Latter-day Saints no. Anyone caught with more than one wife was to be excommunicated from the
Wow.
church. How very Catholic of them. So most people. Oh, Bethany, we keep shitting over our disclaimers, and we have to quit doing that. So most people were actually relieved. But there were still some Charlie Sheens and zealots in the bunch, as there always are.
Of course.
So they weren't giving up polygamy, and they scattered themselves through the West, Canada, and Mexico. Now, some church officials weren't stopping it either, and were performing secret plural marriages.
Of course. We wouldn't. Why not? We would have to have. It's just like dirty cops. You have to
Did
have
I also
dirty,
say how very
dirty
Catholic
church
of them?
officials. I know. The relation there that was
That apple fell straight down from the tree.
Fudge muffins,
Get
man.
every branch on the
It's
way
on the way.
down.
Yes.
Now, to be fair,
To be fair.
these fundamentalists were quiet, unassuming, and they really were being cool until about 1929.
Oh.
Which, again, there was a hell of a lot going on in 1929. So Lauren Woolley blew up the spot because people were always have to like ruin it for the rest of the cool kids.
I was gonna
right?
say, you just said that they were all quiet, kept to themselves until
Unassuming,
one sucker had to come and
and
ruin it
take
all.
a shit on and see. You see, folks, this is why people always throw a frickin' stink. This is why it always has to be settled in the frickin' Supreme Court, because there's always one dick that ruins it for everybody. Do you think the United States government would have cared if everybody was quiet and unassuming and just played it cool, cubby? No, they wouldn't have. But there's always got to be a dick in the bunch that thinks that their rights are more important than everybody else. So, brings us to Lauren Woolley, and he forms a group called the Fundamentalists. So this is the beginning of the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints Church. This is not the church proper that you find in Salt Lake City. They're different. They're a different sect. So I won't go into all of the bullshit of how he justified religiously, because there always has to be a religious justification, I've learned. Anything. If I've learned anything about the Mormon church, somebody has to have a testimony to take a shit in the morning. So it is
somebody has to be like, I poop God's shit.
Just always, that's how it is. So I'm not going to go into how he justified this religiously. Just know that he claimed that he was the true and righteous leader of the righteous. It's always righteous. Leader of the church, and that polygamy was all cool. Hashtag not important how we got there. Just like, no.
Hashtag polygamy is cool.
Oh,
if
God.
Twitter existed back then.
Thank God it didn't.
I know.
Although I shouldn't say that as a person who dearly loves Twitter. I should not say that. God knows I am on Twitter 24/7. I can't say anything about bad about Twitter. I don't deserve to. Now, so even though Woolley had said all this, like the church proper, the actual Latter-day Saints had said, no, like, thanks, but no.
Thanks for your advice, but we're going to go this way.
We like being a state. We like not being a territory, so you can go, like, respectfully F yourself. You said it.
No, you were thinking it.
You said it. So much for us not cussing this episode, too. Sorry. We're going to get there one day, folks. We're going to clean up our sailor mouths. And stop living like it's Fleet Week.
Oh, God. One day.
One day more.
Yes, Les Mis.
God, you know, that's like my favorite. But we don't have time for that.
Sorry. So, okay.
Still, there were a lot of people that weren't particularly keen on the 1890 polygamy abandonment because, again, this is somebody's religion, and those tenets were founded by the prophet himself, Joseph Smith. So there was a lot of ambiguity of the soul, if we will, here. Therefore, Woolley was able to get quite a few converts for his newly established fundamentalist church with a brand new high council of power-hungry dickholes, basically. So Woolley kicks the bucket in 1934.
Sorry.
I love my colloquialisms. I'm sorry. I'm from Texas. I'm from Texas, everybody. We all know that. Woolley kicks the bucket in 34. And, is succeeded by a man by the name of John Barlow. Now, the hardcore...
I've heard that name.
Yeah, so the hardcore... See, it's in there. You've heard these things, but we're just kind of trying to line it out. So the hardcore fundamentalists love this guy because he established the rather famous Short Creek, Arizona colony, which, what a shithole. Just... the middle of nowhere shithole where the polygamous movement could continue to essentially propagate. Now, there's no right way to say it. It may have begun correctly with the correct intentions for all these people to live like a chaste, very low-key, but polygamous life. But since then, historically, there has been some really horrific shit that has occurred in this area. And we encourage you all to please go and see Warren Jeffs. The most recent of things that has happened in the quote-unquote Short Creek, or what used to be Colony. It was renamed by his time.
Okay.
We're going to cover him at a much, much later date. Know that Warren Jeffs is on my radar.
Yes, because of the fact that you actually, when you started this whole deep dive research, I was like, what can I do to prepare and prep myself for this? And you gave me 2 words. Warren Jeffs. And I looked him up, and I can't wait. And maybe that can be a backwards body count or something, because I did a lot of digging. And actually, something very new recently popped up just today about Warren Jeffs.
Yep.
And it has to do with his son, who just moved to and bought a huge piece of land,
and out interesting, out in the middle of nowhere. And then, interesting enough, the colony itself, after Warren Jeffs, people are being allowed to move back in, and polygamists as well are being allowed to reestablish their homes there under the leadership of a trust, under a lawyer by the name of Allred, which will also come up in our story, Bethany.
And this is he was sentenced to life in prison in, I think, 2007.
I don't know that he got life. I thought
he eventually did.
Okay. Well, thank you, God.
Yeah. At first it was, but even with life in prison, they
Thank
claim
you,
that
Christian God, Mormon God, whatever God.
but the problem I see that's going to arise, and we've seen it in history repeat, if there's not, if there's one crazy maniac, and just because he dies doesn't mean it's over.
Doesn't
it just
mean the
means there's an
movement died.
opportunity for another crazy person to step up.
And exactly right. And so, I mean, Warren Jeffs was my jumping off point. I initially was going to do that because I thought, but he almost never broke away and made his own church. He was always fundamentalist Mormon. And so Warren Jeffs is what took me down this hole that leads us to a cult within a religion, within a subsect of a religion proper. And again, that led us to our subject.
Yeah, again, my statement of if just because one crazy asshole dies doesn't mean there isn't another one waiting in the wings to take his place.
Usually their son.
and now we might actually, because 2007 we were about to start our second year of college in 2007, so we weren't really. I don't really think I was paying that much attention to what was going on then. But now all of a sudden his son has now moved into this huge piece of land with this huge house, and people are like, oh wait, we should probably keep our eye on this one,
which if there was ever a shithole that the ATF needed to go raid, like I hate to say it, but maybe just go ahead and Waco that shit and be done with it. Now, oh God, Bethany, you and I are going to get ourselves sued, two.
We should probably start a GoFundMe right now.
So much hate mail from this episode, but I don't care. I don't care. Because that's also part of history. Unpopular frickin' opinions. Yes. Now, once established, the state and federal government began to try to stamp out Short Creek.
Which is where Warren Jeffs was.
Eventually, yes. There have been a lot of good and a lot of bad things in the history, though. Quite frankly, they were pretty cool up until the point that publicly, but we don't know what went on behind closed compound gates. Who freaking knows? So they start trying to stamp out the Short Creek business, and this culminated in a huge raid in the 1950s, and the men of the colony were brought up on charges of polygamy, rape, bigamy, and a bag of other crimes. Rape is a lot of what it's going to come into is statutory rape, because they think it's cool to marry girls
that are 12.
Yeah, sadly.
Sorry. Q Warren Jeffs. 12. Sorry.
That bleeding breed business exists a lot within these polygamy colonies, and it is horrific. But, however, this costs a buttload of taxpayer money, and the money problems for the state were far from over. The sentences were ultimately suspended for the men picked up in the raid when the cost of maintaining the women and children taken from Short Creek soared over $1,000 a day. And remember, this is 1950s money. Everyone simply returned to the Short Creek community, and the only change to life there was to rename the good place for a fire, because that's what it is, Colorado City. So it went from Short Creek to Colorado City. So that's fun.
Nice.
I can feel the bile rising. I literally can. Like, when I mean a good place for a fire, that's a good one. So that ambivalence toward the polygamous colonies remains in both the LDS, so the Latter-day Saints Church, the Mormon Church proper, and the United States government to this day. So despite the illegality of polygamy practicing, colonies in the United States, any overturning of a polygamy conviction makes the government and prosecutors understandably jumpy as a cat. It opens it opens a whole barrel of constitutional monkeys that no one wants to screw with, and it costs the government exactly, and it costs the government a ton of money when they have to put all the wives and children on government assistance. And you have to understand, it's what we were talking about earlier, the balance between taxability and also the constitutional the constitutional right of freedom of religion. But is that a religious necessity? Nobody wants to touch it. Nobody wants to touch it, so they would rather ignore it. So, in essence, fundamentalists are left to their own devices in their own places. So long as they don't make like a huge stink, like Warren Jeffs, a later leader of the Short Creek community, managed to do with his horrifying sexual assault charges that he was convicted of in 2011. Now, basically,
that's when he got 2011 is when he got finally convicted for life in prison.
I'm surprised it took that long, because I've been following that story since I was very, very young. Basically, these places that we're talking about, these compound type places, are in a state of permanent circumvention of the law, because they are there to practice polygamy, and no one quite knows what to do about it. So these compounds and leaders within this area are essentially left to be their own. They're autonomous. Without they're allowed to be their own leadership, their own government. They can do whatever they want, so long as they don't step outside of the bounds, and so long as there's nobody that defects and says, look, he married my fucking 13-year-old daughter, he's a rapist. You know, just so long as it's kept within those communities and it doesn't leak out into the rest of our day-to-day lives, the leader of that colony is ultimately left to that place to be their own president, sovereignty, their own sovereignty within the walls of that compound, if that makes sense, because nobody knows how to fucking deal with it. Because you've got constitutionalism versus what is taxably practical. In my opinion, I think that is what the main problem is. Because again, we're not talking about people that are like sister wives where they live a normal life out in the world. That is not how this works. They make clothes,
that they churn their own butter and make their own clothes and have no phones.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a different world. So to go back to the time of our story, notice I said colonies, compound, churches, plural. That's right. Yeah. So these guys, even within the fundamentalist sect, these guys split up. So unlike the church proper, the Mormon church, the LDS church, when who gets to bang what is the FLDS biggest conviction, understandably, a pissing contest might erupt. Imagine that.
So whose dick is bigger than whose?
Whose dick is bigger than whose? So you've already fractured from the church proper. Why don't we keep fracturing? And that happens very much in the history of the FLDS church. And it's important to our story. So at the time that our story takes place, we have the Short Creek faction of fundamentalists, a faction that supported a man by the name of Roland R. Allred, and then they split from the Short Creekers over a Christ version about who was the king of the polygamists, basically. It's not really important. And then there are all these independents. Now, the independents don't believe that either group of these people held the proper authority, and they branched off into unaligned groups all over the West, Canada, and Mexico.
Jesus.
Yeah. So why the split, Bethany?
Why, Jess? Tell me why.
Tell me why.
I was going into Grease mode, and you went into Backstreet Boys, and I was like, oh, okay.
You were going into Grease mode? I'm sorry I cut you off. I would have been way more into that, actually. You know I'm all about the musicals.
Tell me why. Well, it's not the right
Tell
word.
me why did they split from the church?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So there are numerous differences between the Mormon Church proper, so the Latter-day Saints, and the FLDS, which is going to be the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. And I'm really underselling that point, guys. I can't tell you enough how much how far
Different,
apart
like-
they really are. And again, we got nothing bad to say about Mormons.
Period.
The proper ones. I'm going to have a go at the others. So I'm not here to explain Mormonism to you guys. I'm here to explain the history that is important to our story. So the LDS and the FLDS can really differ on one particular section of Mormon scripture, which essentially states that there will be a one mighty and strong who will set the house of God in order. My God, this is fucking exhausting.
Jesus.
Oh, but
I mean, no, go ahead.
no, I mean, we have to, we have
It's just
shit to
one of
like
those
do
things.
today, and I get it, listeners, but understand that this will be important. So polygamy is not the only split between these two. It's this very important little
It's
part
the
of
true
scripture
God,
here.
and
Well, the true prophet.
yeah,
Ugh.
the prophet of God. There we go. Sorry.
And like I said, we both know how exhausting that this
I'm starting to get a
is.
migraine now. Like,
But none of the rest of our story will make any kind of sense if you
if we don't talk
know
about it,
this. Exactly. Otherwise, it's just going to be like, oh, well, it's a guy out of his mind. No, 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 no. There was a basis to all of this.
he had a godly vision.
Doesn't everybody in this fucking story? You're gonna get tired of hearing that shit. Like, I promise you right now. It is exhausting. So fundamentalists on the whole believe this one spoken of is Joseph Smith, who will return one day to unite the LDS and the church proper with the fundamentalists. Now, this is a fundamentalist view, not a Mormon view, who believe that they are the ones that are actually right. So the ones that didn't give up polygamy think that Joseph Smith's going to return one day to unite the church proper and their splinter sect who stayed true to polygamy, and they're all going to be united under the principle, which is polygamy, if that makes sense. It doesn't. It fucking doesn't, but try. Like, use your imagination for this chaos magic.
No, I get what you're saying.
Okay.
However, it's
But only some
I'm
people
eye rolling right now.
Yeah,
Okay?
real hard. Like my optic nerve has been severed because my eyeball has gone all the way around in my eye. I'm just blind and doing this from memory.
Oh God.
But there are other sects we've already established within fundamentalism who believe other things. So many of these polygamous sects, however, started to crop up claiming that the, quote, one mighty and strong has yet to come, or that their various leaders are actually the, quote, one mighty and strong. So basically prophets that inherited that from Joseph Smith, if that makes sense, that the one mighty and strong has yet to come. So good. That doesn't sound super cultish at all, right?
No, not at all.
That doesn't sound at all L. Ron Hubbardish. Not in the least. So basically, it's a bunch of dudes slap fighting each other over who has the most authority. Fundamentalists holding that their various leaders are actually the top dogs in the church, LDS or FLDS hierarchy. Now, they are battling it out to see who is the most correct and who gets to tell other people how to live their lives.
Oh my God.
And others are simply making themselves prophets. And That is into the split of LDS and FLDS as I am willing to get bogged down in. And in our entire story, that's as far as I'm willing to deep dive it. So, to sum it up, there are the people we're going to be talking about from the actual Mormon church. There are multiple sects of fundamentalists. Often, they are left to their own devices in their own places. Some of them believe they are going to be the future saviors of the Mormon church, essentially by uniting FLDS with LDS into one polygamous and vice versa special underwear paradise of 1800s bullshit. That's the best that I can attempt to summarize it for you guys. And I'll also say that this kind of information is what makes this a history podcast and not a true crime podcast, and the events of our story that we're going to talk about historically significant, because we get very much into how entire portions of the country and of different countries are shaped essentially by religious beliefs. So this is going to be important. Yes. We don't just give you the, he killed people and come over the blood, okay? Like, we're not that kind of podcast. So we want to give you the full explanation. This is what makes this a history podcast.
Why these people died.
Exactly, what the basis is. And again,
we're going to get there with this one.
We're trying to keep you focused on zealotism is what we're ultimately getting at and what we're ultimately driving at and attacking today. So now, the LeBarons. We are just now to the subject matter.
When you first sent this to me, I was like, the LeBrons. Because it's spelled LeBarons. The LeBrons.
We French all of a sudden. Les Barons. Les Barons. Suddenly, like, Bethany decided to learn French today, even though she asked me what quoi meant the other day.
Shut up. I hate you. I just want to be smart like you, damn it.
You are smart. I don't speak French. I don't speak French. You do?
I do. I mean, I know French terms because of dance.
Well, no, you wouldn't have asked me what claw meant. I'm sorry. A couple of fucking dance terms do not count as knowing the language, Bethany.
Fuck you. I tried. I don't like it. Oh my god. You're laughing at my dumbness. I don't like you right now.
No, you are not dumb. You are not dumb. Don't say that. Don't say that.
Don't even say that.
Don't even say that. I'm sorry. I'm laughing at. I do, and I was like, really? Then why did you ask me what quoi meant? And then you said dance terms. So it's understandably a little funny to me, and I apologize for choking while laughing. I apologize.
You're a bitch.
I'm 110% a bitch. That was never a question. Not for anybody that's listened to this podcast from the beginning. So, our subject matter today, the LeBaron family. Ultimately, Ervil LeBaron. So the LeBarons.
Dr. Evil.
Dr. Evil. God damn it, Bethany. I wrote this not to cuss. And we have blown through that cattle guard and 3 others on the way. Like, my goodness.
Like at the very beginning.
At the very beginning. I wanted to start at this professionally, but we can't do anything professional, you and I together. So it just is what it is. Now, because of where the LeBarons get off later in the story, we're going to have to give a little family history as well. So not just history of the church, we're also going to have to give history of the family. And I promise by the time we get into the series, you're going to be like, what are these two crazy bitches talking about? But it's all going to make sense.
It all comes together.
Otherwise, if we don't do this family history, when I start talking about invisible, fictitious power mantles, y'all are going to be like saying to yourselves, what the F? So, like, let's get into it. This story really begins with our subject's father, Joel LeBaron, a descendant of a proud Mormon ancestry. Now, his grandfather, Benjamin F. Johnson, had been a close friend of the prophet Joseph Smith. Now,
which we've all heard about Joseph
We've
Smith.
all heard about Joseph Smith. We're not here to have a go at him. So Dare had spent a lot of time with old grandfather before he kicked the bucket. Now, Dare had grown up fundamentalist and really polygamous, and the son of a Franklin LeBaron and Jeannie Johnson, the first cousin, effing yuck. They had floated around the polygamous settlements in Mexico most of his life. Now, the biggest influence, and again, they went to Mexico because it is against the law in the United States, whereas in Mexico, they could pay a little money and they could be allowed to subsist. So that's why a lot of these colonies popped up in Mexico. We went over that earlier. Now, the biggest influence in Franklin's life was his uncle and father-in-law. Take that in for a minute, folks. Okay. Uncle and father-in-law, Benjamin F. Johnson. So Uncle Ben. Now, Franklin LeBaron and Jeannie.
No, you mean Uncle Daddy Ben.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I wasn't going to make the joke, but I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
Uncle Daddy Ben. Here we go.
Oh, fuck me. I hate this story. I hate everything about it, but it has to be done. So, Franklin LeBaron and Jeannie wanted a second wife, and they took their son Dare and the other children and headed down to Mexico. So life was hard in Mexico, but Franklin and Jeannie managed, and they never realized the polygamous dream. They were unable to find ultimately a second wife. Now, Dare, however, was able to do so, and around 18 in Colonial Juarez, managed to become a church elder, marrying a Cynthia Barbara Bailey, and they had a kid the same year that Uncle Ben died. Now, why is this important?
Well, let's think. If the person that's in charge dies, it gets passed down to the next son.
That's right. Somebody that was BFFs with the OG Joseph Smith, right? So,
yeah.
Here's where we start to really get
my daddy was friends with the main guy, so I
might be entitled to something. Exactly. So here's where we start to really, really get off into the crazy weed, folks. So the LeBaron,
not the smoking weed, the actual weed.
I wish it was the smoking weed. I wish it was.
Oh shit!
Because you eventually sober up from the really good medical shit. We don't ever sober up in this story.
No.
This is not the Reggie that we're in here, folks. This is like this is pure fucking CIA government grade LSD we're about to drop for the rest of this story.
Yes.
Like, it is insane. So when we say we're off in the weeds, we mean like person high Johnson grass for the rest of this story. The LeBaron family crazy stems from maybe the inbreeding?
The marijuana inbreeding plant.
You know, the fact that you got Uncle Father-in-laws is...
Uncle Daddy Ben.
Uncle Daddy Ben is a bit of a problem, but what do I know? So, sure, they're almost like, and I want our history lovers in the bunch to understand that they are a weirder, Western version of the Plantagenets, but also their belief that they have a claim to lordship over the earth. Yes, that's some very bold shit there. So let's go ahead and continue. They believe this claim emanated from an authority received by the Johnsons, beginning with Benjamin F. Johnson, was Uncle Daddy Johnson. Now, Johnson never mentioned any of this in his autobiography or other family conversations, but the LeBarons contend that Johnson was secretly given a hidden mantle of authority by his good friend Joseph Smith.
He was given
you gotta
a mystical,
understand.
magical, invisible mantle by this ghost Joseph Smith.
No, well, Joseph Smith was alive when he gave it. It's just the family never told anybody. And the LeBarons had a vision from Joseph Smith or God knows what else that they made up. That they were, God damn it, the next leaders. They had authority ultimately over all of the earth. So you can understand very, very early where we get into this cult bullshit crazy mentality of like, oh, aliens are going to take over my body. I mean, it's just the same Scientology type shit. So, again, the LeBarons contending that Johnson was secretly given a hidden mantle of authority by his good friend Joseph Smith, and it was passed down through the generations. So when Dare was around 10, his brother Conway said grandfather Ben had given him the charge over the Johnson family. And the other LeBarons say that Johnson's angel gave him power over the world in the 1920s. Bethany, skip the fuck over it. All right. So now Dare never did anything without this. He never did anything with this quote unquote power except to pass it on, as it were, as he was supposedly supposed to, until the time was right for the correct LeBaron to claim it. Now, I told you guys this was going to get fucking weird in a hurry, okay?
Okay, so hold on. Let me just make sure I understand this. LeBaron believed that Uncle Daddy Johnson was the true authority. It was given to him by Joseph Smith. But Uncle Daddy Johnson didn't use the power and just held on to it until the correct heir.
Yes, you're on to it.
To claim it? Okay, I'm following. All right, continue.
I can clearly see that I have converted you to way too much Game of Thrones because you followed all of that. So
I'm kind of proud of myself. Let's go. Keep going. All right.
Like the Mormon version of Game of Thrones here. So now, Dare bounced around and eventually married a Maud McDonald after his first wife left him. And it was at this time that he had a vision. Yes, a vision. So there's a clue about kind of some mental illness.
Here's your sign.
Here's your sign. About 100-year vision of the future of Mexico.
Oh, Jesus.
Now, Dare never got out of the quote-unquote visions business, though, and his daughter, Lucinda, went, according to the time, mad and was institutionalized. And I only say that because I've been reading a lot of sources, guys. I understand mad is not acceptable, but that's what is written. Yeah. And understandable based on the amount of freaking inbreeding that exists within a lot of these.
Do we learn nothing from Edward?
No. That's why I said they're Western Plantagenets. you've got to understand inbreeding factors into this, which unfortunately is also a byproduct of these like colony living type situations. Now, the family, and there were a ton of children, began to bounce around between the United States and Mexico based on Dare's visions and messages from God, often at great financial loss. So the family finally landed back in Juarez in 1924, but due to revolution in Mexico, less than a third of the original polygamous colonists remained in Mexico. So they ended up kind of moving on to an LDS missionary colony proper, if that makes sense.
Okay.
At very least, Dare finally felt God had led him to Mexico, where he was to stay until he died. It was in Mexico on February 22nd, 1925, that Ervil LeBaron was
Dr. Evil.
Dr. Evil. Now, they settled in Colonies, Juarez, and they were just as dirt poor as could be. Dare was viewed as the town crackpot, and work was hard to come by. Not only that, but the children were ostracized by the town, beaten up horribly at school, and just all around tormented. I know if what doesn't
They didn't
happen,
choose that life, poor kiddos.
if what doesn't happen later in the story, that's absolutely heartbreaking, but it does happen. So Colonial Juarez was, again, an LDS proper, so a proper Mormon church colony, and they were determined to make examples of the people that came to Mexico to live the quote-unquote principle, which is basically polygamy. That's what it's referred to as.
This Colonia Juarez was basically like
It was a Mormon church proper colony.
Like,
so where
you come here and try to do your
allowed.
principle, we're gonna smack you down. Okay.
We're gonna smack you down. The church does not practice polygamy. Exactly. So the kids all began as members of the LDS church, and as a result, they were required to promise to ignore their parents' teachings, essentially denying their parents. So going into the story, you have to understand none of these kids had a great life, and most especially the boys. It is heartbreaking in a way.
Yeah, the girls, but
I mean, at least they got the option to marry somebody without having to marry into polygamy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas if they had grown up in an FLDS sect, they would have had to been polygamous and would have been married at 12. At least here, they got a chance.
Yeah.
Like, sadly enough, whereas the boys, they just get bombarded from both sides. So
yeah,
the brothers eventually went on to their Mormon missions in the early 1940s. As we know, we're not going to get into it. Mormons have to do missions. I'm not going to explain. We all know the concept. But it wasn't like peace and prosperity for long. First, the boys weren't even close to giving up on the, quote, principle. So Benjamin LeBaron really proved to be the catalyst for the break. Now, Ben LeBaron really wanted that invisible authority mantle that their father was always talking about, whatever the fuck, from their father Dare. And Daddy was always necessarily going on about it. Now, Ben had an insane need to impress. Unfortunately for Ben, it's thought that he struggled with a serious form of what appears to be schizophrenia, onset from puberty. So that's particularly early for onset schizophrenia. Again, we can only blame the inbreeding.
yes.
At least according to their family doctor. But understand, back at this time, they didn't necessarily have a term for schizophrenia or understand it fully. So, I mean, who knows? Poor Ben was continually institutionalized for going completely batshit crazy, for lack of a better term. Now, the family doctor, one Dr. Hatch, believed the, quote, disease Because it was like 19-0, so we can't be 100% sure. Let's face it. But the quote disease was hereditary and included delusions of grandeur, introversion, disassociation disorders, and odd, erratic, distorted behavior based on his notes at the time. He was yelling about everything from extraterrestrial spirits to being the quote one mighty and strong. Now see, there it is, Bethany. We got it gets crazier from here. So along with this is the most sane we're going to get in the rest of the story. So you will enjoy these days as we get through this. So along with his buddy Sidney, Ben pulled in brothers Alma and Ervil LeBaron on this wacky adventure, and it got weird in a hurry. Now the boys,
shit got weird.
Shit got weird, and it's gonna keep getting weird. So the boys all returned to the LeBaron ranch that Darren managed to purchase in Mexico, called now Colonia LeBaron. Here they lived, just barely eating, more or less prospering. The wives and children were treated like dirt.
Oh, of course they were.
Of course they were. So they were basically viewed as lesser, as property of the men of this little group. And we're not saying, guys, that this is the normal, even among polygamous groups, but this was the normal here. So this was it. So Ben propagated ideas like cursing every other word so that people wouldn't feel ashamed of such language, so that they felt they might get over their prejudices, which God knows we can't denounce that one. So even it speaks to us, at least on one level.
Yeah.
He also said there was no such thing as deviance or sin. It was only unacceptable if the perpetrator's conscience bothered them.
What?
Yeah, so you could murder, and if you slept okay at night, then it wasn't a sin. Which might come into play later, I'm just gonna say.
Sorry.
Yeah, so it's real crazy shit, and it doesn't stop from here on out. So Ben and Sydney went to Salt Lake to straighten out the quote church, and of course Ben this landed him in the asylum again because he was roaring at people, claiming to be the quote Lion of Israel, which that's fine.
Listen to me.
At least
I am the Lion of Israel.
Can you imagine a grown man like in special Mormon underwear, like growling at people?
Hear me roar.
It's always the weirdest shit that's the most fun, honey child. Like, I'm in for that. Ugh. Oh my God, I never drink on this podcast, but I had to take a drink because this is just the nuttiest shit. And I wrote this, and you have no idea how nutty it is. So, Sydney was released even if Ben wasn't from the asylum, and he returned home to ordain Ervil and Alma to the apostleship of the 144,000 for Ben LeBaron.
Wow.
And it wasn't too long before Sydney started sprouting for lack of a better term. Now, Alma and especially Ervil soon vowed to have nothing to do with either of them, as it just got crazier from there. Needless to say, Ben and Sydney eventually ended up in the asylum for the rest of their days.
Yeah.
But Ervil did learn something. College-educated Ben taught Ervil a great deal about writing. especially in an inflammatory, prophesying manner, if you will. And there was a lesson or two about gaining power and keeping it in there for Ervil. And I promise all of this is going to come together as our story goes along, Bethany.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's all coming together. Like, we start out from the beginning. We have this person, and then their son does this and joins up with another person, and then they go. I mean,
we could do a 45 minutes for you, but that's not really history, is it? So
no. You would lose me then. I would sign off. I'd be like,
you'd be like, none of this makes sense. I'm not interested. I didn't sign up for this shit. So even with all of this going on, Colonial LeBaron was still going, and like the orchards they had planted were well on their way after these events. It's life is moving forward. And all the LeBaron boys continue to ask for the quote mantle from Dare. And ultimately it would be Joel LeBaron, or at least according to the Mother Maud and a large majority of people, that would be the recipient. Now, Dare LeBaron died on January 19th, 1951, committed to the idea that his son would have the mantle of authority over the fundamentalists, the All Red group, and, well, the world.
Oh, wow.
Now, this, again, I have to remind you, is the sanest that this story gets going forward. We're going to look back on this time, guys, when this story is finished and say, well, wasn't that a great fucking time? Like,
it wasn't that just peachy. This is going to be like the vanilla of the story. It hasn't even begun to get batshit crazy.
Yeah, no, sadly enough, that is the best explanation. Yes.
This is the vanilla. Part 1 vanilla of FLDS.
We've been fucking sane since this point, all right? Like,
yeah.
For a while, though, the LeBaron brothers, however many of the assholes there actually were in the end, just sort of rested on their laurels. So a big shot from the OG fundamentalist group, they had taken to calling themselves the United Order.
Oh, God.
Margarito Batista established a co-op on or near Colonial LeBaron. I'm not entirely sure. The literature isn't super clear. This has been a hard one to research. Now, even though the LeBarons had a tendency to be a bit disloyal and really up and down, the fundamentalist elders of the United Order and the All Red groups always seem to, quote, forgive these boys their bad or weird behavior, which speaks to kind of magnetic personalities for all of them, I would say. Now, all the boys even swore before this weird council of elders several times that they were going to be good and remain under the elders' yoke. Because God. All we've seen thus far is just a stable bunch that they've been, right? Like,
actions speak louder than words.
Right? Because this seems to be a group of perfectly stable human beings. So we all knew that that wouldn't last long because Joel Ross and Florin LeBaron and another member did some fake mantle fighting for a bit. And then they formed their own church. That's the best I can put it. That is why I have done this entire history. So that I could lead up to that and it didn't sound absolutely insane when I said it.
Fake man. I could just picture it's like what Hollywood does when they don't really have the light up saber, in like Star Wars or whatever, and they're just smacking, and it's a fake piece of shit.
I spun my microphone. I'm laughing. I'm rubbing my eyes so hard.
I'm crying. I have been crying.
Do you for that sentence right there? Thank you for reacting the way I thought you would react, because all the shit I have talked about led up to, I wanted to start here, and I thought, there's no way I can do that because that makes no fucking sense when I say it without all the background and all the research that I've done. That doesn't make any sense. So, they're over their fake mantle fighting. They formed their own church. So on September 21st, 1955, they declared Joel LeBaron the president. Now, Ross quickly split, though, as the fake mantle fighting immediately started back up after the high of, like, church establishing apparently wore off. Whatever. Joel and Ross, like, officially had this weird brother breakup, I guess.
We're not brothers anymore.
It just gets weirder from here. I wish it didn't, but it's gonna keep getting weirder. So after just having pledged their loyalty to the fundamentalist elders, right? Joel now set out to try and make those same elders follow him and his church. Now, Joel then gave some crazy revelations, especially aimed at the Allred family, who considered it heresy. Now, while Joel began attempting, and again, the Allreds are a subgroup of the fundamentalists, weird as that may sound. Now, while Joel was attempting to convert, like find converts in the United States, so stateside, Florin LeBaron went home to Mexico to break the news to the rest of the family that Joel had started church, claimed to be the prophet, and was breaking with the fundamentalists.
It's almost like he went, Mom, guess what Joel's doing? Joel's saying this and doing this. Mom, can you please get him? He's ruining it for me.
No, that's exactly what it is. 'Cause these people have no boundary issues. That's like within this, like this particular subset too, there's this belief that you have to like talk about everything as a family, like even the little children. It's fucking weird. Whatever. So Ervil,
can we please call him Dr. Evil?
I wish we could. You can.
Dr. Evil.
You can,
and
but
you
I'm
can,
not going to. I'll say Ervil, and you say
Dr. Evil.
There we go.
That's
Took it particularly hard as Joel headed home. Now, a meeting of the United Order at Colonial LeBaron, which the United Order is the main sect of fundamentalists, convened to hear what it was that Joel had to say. Ervil, meanwhile, back at the literal ranch in this case, was prepared to poke holes in all of Joel's revelations. But after Joel returned and he closeted with Ervil, which...
So what was going on in that closet with Dr. Evil?
With Dr. Evil. Well, you know, I couldn't help but laugh in this circumstance that closeted... who knows with these people. Yeah. He emerged convinced and joined Joel's church.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. So after whatever Joel said to Ervil, and I know what he said, but I'm not going to go into it. Let's just say it convinced Ervil that Joel was some kind of fucking prophet, or maybe Ervil was just playing a deeper game, as we're going to find out eventually.
Maybe he was infiltrating.
Well,
spy game.
Somebody's got to do the hard work of starting the church. He could just take over it, couldn't he? Now, after that, the LeBarons were all in, like the whole family and their followers. And this is an early indication of who really pulled the strings. And
who wore the pants.
Exactly. In the LeBaron clan and all of their followers, where the real power rested. Now,
I mean, nobody wanted to follow him until Dr. Evil was like, okay,
until Ervil said, "This is, I believe this, I'm joining, this is the way it's going to be." Exactly. So Rulon Allred, head of his own splinter group of fundamentalists, sort of in and sort of out of the United Order, aka the FLDS proper, mind you, I told you there was a reason for all this, set his mind to straightening out the LeBaron boys. He sent 2 disciples to put the literal fear of God into them. Instead, Joel managed to convert them. Which,
Whoa.
How?
I don't know if I want to know.
I don't know that I want to know either, but like, I don't know what all these people are on. It's some serious hospital grade shit, and I would
Sign
like
me
to
up,
be on
Scotty.
it too,
Can
right?
where do I sign?
Where do I sign and where do you give it to me intravenously? I am here for it. Like, is it just Demerol? Is it morphine? What are you giving them? I want
is
some.
it a combination? I mean,
Is
what
it a
dosage?
full-fledged like spinal tap? I don't know. I don't care, but I'm here for whatever I got to do to get it because it's some good shit, clearly.
Yeah.
Now they sent letters back basically saying, screw with the LeBarons. If you deny them, you're basically playing with fire. Now, this was the LeBarons' first foray into, well, threatening the fundamentalists and the Allred group. Veiled as it may have been, that's where threatening begins, if you will.
I mean, I really true is like, you fuck with me, you fuck with any of them, you're gonna fucking die. You're mine. And that's it. It's like True Blood. Like,
you just went full True Blood. Suck it. I require your allegiance.
For real though.
No, really and truly. And as we go into this, we're gonna see just how dangerous that mindset begins to get.
I am your master. I am your maker.
You are mine. I command you. So April 3rd, 1956, Joel convenes the first official church meeting, opened missions, and named the church the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Time, which wordy fucking title.
Freaking Christ.
Right, exactly.
10 times fast.
Jesus, Mary, and Joseph Stalin is a quicker get through. Like,
why didn't they think of that?
Oh, I would attend a church tomorrow that named itself that. And the worst part is they began writing the firstborn, because that's what I'm going to call him from now on. I'm not saying that whole title. I don't have that kind of breath control. So just the firstborn. They began writing the Firstborn Bible.
Oh, God.
God help us all. Exactly.
Jesus, here we go.
And who was in charge of that task? But
Dr. Evil,
the scriptorian, which is basically like the Goebbels of this particular cult. Like, basically, he's writing the propaganda.
Nazi.
Yeah, pretty much. He's writing the propaganda. He's getting the message out there. Is his primary directive from invisible power mantle Joel, quote unquote. So Ervil would work for hours on the wording of a single sentence, which if I had that kind of discipline, this would be a better podcast. Okay, like,
no, we wouldn't have a podcast. We
30
wouldn't. Years later, first episode is released.
I worked 72 hours on the rough outline that we're going off of right now, so I can't imagine like single sentence wording. We wouldn't put anything out. Basically, it was a lot of jazz about how Benjamin F. Johnson got the invisible power mantle of authority from his friend Joseph Smith. A la
like John the Baptist, right?
John the Beloved and Jesus. I don't know, and I don't give a shit. So basically, the LeBarons had, quote unquote, inherited the priesthood, and it had kept They had kept it secret until Joel came along, yada yada. Ervil was second man on the totem pole, as it were, only after Joel, of course. Now, while Joel spent the day working in the fields and, like, I don't know, talking to birds like he was Saint Francis of Assisi and shit, and having visions, Ervil wouldn't dirty his hands, though. Always in the missionary field or charting, like, church direction, making the goals, or reading and writing. As Joel opted to be low profile, Ervil happily filled the power vacuum. A dissenter of the early church wrote, "The root of the whole trouble is Ervil. We do not belong to Joel's church. We belong to Ervil's church." Thank you, Freddie, foreshadowing of the firstborn church of whatever. Like, blow.
I mean, this is why, and actually, I read through this. For those that don't know, we do have a script. Otherwise, we would have an 8-hour-long podcast.
I'd say we have an outline.
Yes. But this is why I have started calling him Dr. Evil. Because while Joel was, of course, has the invisible power mantle of authority, it's actually Ervil that's doing, and you said he wouldn't get his hands dirty, but not in actual work. But he does his Dr. Evilness by basically...
Exactly.
And we'll see. We'll get to what he's
doing
does,
is sitting around creating propaganda. What he's doing is putting himself, whether we like it or not. And this is a sad fact about humanity. We don't want to follow the manager that gets down there and does the same work we do. We respect the authority more of the asshole that sits behind the desk and does bullshit all day. And Ervil recognized that in human beings, sad as it is. Like, it disgusts me, but that's probably the sad truth. It was very, very smart. It really, really was. You are not wrong, Bethany. Now, the church was about to get some new members that would raise a big stink in the form of some LDS missionaries stationed in France. Now, the second in command there, Bill Tucker, fell hard for the mysteries, as the LDS refers to them too. So the church proper refers to them as these, which within the Mormon Bible is pretty much everything that they're kind of iffy on, from the special underwear to the promised land, etc. And the first and foremost of those things being the, quote, principle, which basically...
for polygamy.
Exactly. Yeah. So... on that quest, he discovered Ervil's Priesthood Expounded, which was the name of the firstborn Bible pamphlet addendum to...
the name of the firstborn Bible was called...
Priesthood Expounded. But it's not even really a Bible. It's if you take the Book of Mormon and... added everything that Joel has to add to it, if that makes sense. And I say Joel loosely because he supposedly had the revelations and Ervil wrote them. So it's like a pamphleted addendum to the Book of Mormon, if that makes sense. Okay. So Tucker, along with a handful of prominent young missionaries, was determined to basically... I don't know how to explain it. They had kind of gotten together. And so on this quest, they had found Priesthood Expounded. And so he takes all these young missionaries and they want to go and join the LeBarons in Mexico.
They wanted to get further in depth and go on the righteous path.
Exactly, because... essentially their little Bible study had gotten really into the mysteries and it took them down this weird dark path, and so that's where they found the LeBarons at, and they really believed that this group in Mexico was the real deal, if that makes sense.
And and because of the fact that they didn't have answers, they were willing to
Exactly. That is
go into
exactly what
depth.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to impart. They were willing to
Yeah.
go there,
I
and
mean,
they
this
were
happens all
willing
the
to
time.
see. No, it does. It's just, it's not usually within a religion itself
Yeah.
that you see these sect differences. It's usually, oh, it's like a one-off thing. Like that's what you usually see with cults. It's something
Yeah.
completely different than what somebody believes. Whereas this is quite clever to me, and that it
Mm-hmm.
plays off of subtle nuances between whatever you want or believe about Mormonism. They do no
Mm-hmm.
harm. It is what somebody believes. It's fine. This is a sect inside a sect, and then a cult inside of that.
But
And
well,
it's
yeah,
exactly. So
it goes down a deep, deep like chain of events,
and so
basically.
I can see where they were already headed to inside of a sect of a religion proper. Then they came across this literature almost of a cult inside of the sect, and they were bound and determined that they were going to go and figure out what it was all about.
Yeah, they want to know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So regardless, and do understand, this had never happened before in the Mormon church proper. That
Yeah.
a large group of very prominent missionaries and very prominent young people just said, fuck it.
Fuck it.
We're done. We're done with you. We think you've lied to all of us. And of course, they were publishing literature and sending it home.
Mm-hmm.
And it causes this huge stink inside of the Mormon church proper. This had never happened before. And they
Yeah.
said, screw you. Peace, like, be upon
Screw
you. We
you,
don't
I'm going home.
Exactly. We don't care if you excommunicate us. We don't care. You're not the real church. We're going down to Mexico to find the LeBarons. Um, so the little French missionaries and some of their family, so they had further converts just from the power of how much they believed in
Wow.
this. Headed off to Mexico and look like Colonial LeBaron. There they found life none too easy at the Colonial LeBaron. 10% of all earnings and savings in perpetuity were earmarked for the church. Most men were forced to return to the States to seek work, leaving the wives and children because, Mexico has never been like a huge economic force. So
Opportunity for jobs.
exactly. So a lot of these people, to have money to get to the church, had to go back to the United States and work, which leaves their wives and their children to work their narrow asses off in poverty at the Colonial LeBaron just to make a living. Now, missionaries for Joel's new church just lived without. And Bill Tucker, the guy that ultimately brought all these converts, and they were getting converts, but these were really high profile converts that knew how to be missionaries. So that's also very important. And Bill Tucker gave everything up to live this way. Now, these people had a hard life. They worked constantly day and night. And while the men had it hard, the women had it worse. So then, of course, while all that's going on, they're basically living like a 1700 farmer's life. Like, it is hard work. So while all that's going on, the children went to the Colonies school, which is, of course, led by
Dr.
Ervil.
Evil.
Now, there the indoctrination, if you will, began early. That's always good. That's never a sign it's going to get super culty later on in your story. That's
No.
never an early indicator. If history has taught us
Brainwashing our
anything,
children. Right?
brainwashing our children is never dangerous. So as a patriarch, Ervil considered himself the real leader, not
Of course he
Joel, of the political and civil kingdom of God. Joel may have prophesied, but all the practical day to day, that was Ervil's business. Now,
Mhm.
the LDS Mormon Church proper due to the defection of their good little French missionaries, saw the LeBarons for the first time as a real threat. And they went so far as to spy on the group. Now, the spy's reports were not promising. He foresaw violence eventually erupting from and within the group. The LeBaron group were in Catholic Mexico, which did not look kindly, understandably, on polygamy. And while the LDS and the FLDS churches believed when they set up colonies down there, they were guests in a foreign land and that they should always be courteous and just, like basically cool, Cubby. The LeBarons were downright intolerant. I would actually say full-blown, right? Full-blown racist. No doubt about it. And never a sign that it's going to get weird.
Ever.
A huge eye roll. Like, again, indoctrination and racism never means it's going to get super weird in history, ever.
When have we ever seen that?
All of Nazi Germany. Furthermore, there was the threat of violence from the actual LeBaron family itself. For one, they saw themselves as the world's only true path to spiritual enlightenment and salvation, as it were. So the LeBarons thought they were the rightful heirs of Joseph Smith, but not all the brothers were content to let it be Joel. And the LDS spy noted Ervil was chief among them and not exactly content, as it were.
What do you mean?
What?
God.
Right, exactly. Surprise, surprise. Which brings us to the first official murder in our story.
Oh, shit.
So, a colony member...
What are we in, like an hour in? We're just now talking about one murder?
And I know it's a lot to talk about, guys, but trust me, you're going to have enjoyed it.
It's going to add up.
It's going to add up because none of this story, I marked where I wanted to begin it, and none of it will make sense by the end if we didn't go through all this bullshit. So here comes our first murder. A colony member, believe it or not, with their lax policies of tolerance and racism, was shot dead in the streets of a nearby town in Mexico by 15 bullets from at least 3 different sources. Now,
Jesus.
Yeah.
He pissed somebody off.
Fucking thorough. I'll say that.
That motherfucker's dead for sure.
Dead for sure. Now, the
Jesus.
murder was never solved, but it generated, and this is why it's important, it generated some major press on this group. And it was all bad, understandably. Yeah. Even Time magazine got in on the action. Now, the firstborn alleged that the member was murdered because he was too good at converting followers. Yeah, that's it. Okay. That's it. So it was a big cluster, as you can imagine, guys. So October of 1966 rolls around and sees another murder. This time on the edge of the colony itself. A former all-red convert had grown disenchanted with the LeBaron firstborn church, especially Joel and Ervil and their accounting practices. Now, money. The entire story is another cluster, and the truth remains largely unknown. I will say a LeBaron was never an official suspect. Either way, to the folks at Colonial LeBaron, they were reminded by the killing of their further prejudices, and they remembered that they were living in a largely lawless land at the time.
And they're in Mexico. So.
At a place where justice could be bought, if you will. So eventually, it brought several of the little French missionaries that had given the church such a boost to their freaking senses.
Oh, God, it's just about freaking time.
Thank you,
Wake
Lord.
the fuck up from your sleep state or your hypnosis or whatever the fuck they're doing in behind closed doors.
Exactly. And based on what happens later, they're going to be real thankful. Mess ended up at odds, surprise, surprise, with Ervil and found themselves kind of working at cross purposes with him. Appeals to Joel were given attention, but it was kind of all bark and no bite. Again, Joel was out playing like he was the Mormon Saint Francis,
running without clothes on.
Exactly, and not running a church. So Ervil merely agreed with Joel and carried on as before, becoming less and less subtle in his complete undermining of Joel. The original French defector, Bill Tucker, even wrote to his wife in California, and in French, the smart boy, because he heard through the grapevine that Ervil had been planning to kill him.
Oh.
He had been such a pain in Ervil's ass. Apparently, he'd quite had enough.
Yeah.
So he had taken it to mind that he was going to kill this pain in his ass, little missionary Bill Tucker.
Yeah.
In hindsight, the LeBaron firstborn church converts and eventually defectors, their most tangible takeaway was what they thought had been kind of bullshit rants from Ervil. And they weren't. They weren't idle threats. And
they were true. They were true things.
Yeah. Exactly. That threat to Bill Tucker kind of brought it home for everybody because Ervil was in earnest planning his murder.
Yeah.
In one early church defector's words, we suddenly realized when Ervil casually talked about wiping someone out or doing away with him if he stood in his way, he was serious. He really began to feel that he had God's power to go and take lives if he so desired.
Okay, Hitler.
Yeah. And that, with that piece of Freddy foreshadowing, is we're going to wrap up part one right there.
There's just so much to talk about.
Well, that's the problem. If we don't give this background, I'm afraid that, I mean, think if I just started talking about this, Bethany.
I would be so lost.
That's why it doesn't get very much attention, I feel like, in the history of the Western United States, in the history of North America. I also think it doesn't get a lot of attention in true crime history or in cultist history.
But that's because you're talking about religion. And
and nobody ever wants to go into figuring out what the motivation was. And this is why I also wanted to preface in the beginning for anybody who's bothered to stick with us to the end. That's why I want to preface in history we take an hypothesis and we try to take our sources and prove it from there on out. And nothing about these people exists other than what the main facts of the story is. And this is something that I put together. This is something that I'm not taking from a source, really. I went out and actually did the work this time, Bethany. You'll be proud of me. Or the work, as I term it in history terms, and actually fucking did it. And it's not something that you're going to hear a lot of other places, and it's not something that you're going to hear very often. You're just not going to, because I had to go down so many freaking rabbit holes to get to where these
facts and actual
where these people got off, if that makes sense. Like, where the fuck do you get off doing and saying what he's going to do and say in the future? And it was very, very difficult to find.
So it's like once you found a person, then you found another person, and then it found another person, and it just kind of connected you back and back and back.
And I have read so many firsthand accounts, and it took me back, and it took me back, and it took me back, and I felt like this story, and I've known this story for a long time, has never made sense to me. But I feel like with this information for the first time, it made sense to me. And exactly.
Yeah.
The reality is it's a cult within a subsection of a religion, which you don't get that often. And that's what makes this particularly interesting. And I think it's something that very much applies to our world today, because you see all these right-wing militia cults, but ultimately they're offshoots of what are very Protestant-based churches in the South now. And it's a lot of people say it's something that we haven't seen before, right? It's something kind of unusual to the history of the United States, to the history of the world. I'm here to contend that no, it's not. No, it's not. This is actually something that occurs right here in the story we're talking about. So to see these violent groups kind of subsist from the sects of subsets of religion proper, it's not that uncommon. And I didn't want to go too far back in history, but I wanted to take it someplace that it does get very violent and it does get very interesting when you see this zealotism and very real. And that is why we chose Ervil LeBaron. And so that is why we took you through that long meandering history of bullshit, because next week it's just gonna get weirder.
Yay!
Right? We don't have much excitement for that, but that's where we're at, guys. So stage is set, and I hate to break it to you, but it's all down here, or downhill from here. Now, normally we would talk about things that make us happy, whatever. In counterculture, we've gone long enough, and we just don't have the energy or the inclination. So, Bethany, well, first let's plug the podcast.
Of course.
Let's plug the network first. You're going to find them at MSE Network on Twitter. Go check out MichiganSportsAndEntertainment.com. You can find everything. We've got some more announcements as far as the podcast network coming up in future. Please stick with us, guys. A lot of things going to happen with that little collective there. You can go and find the podcast itself. Go follow us at Body Count Pod on Twitter, Body Count Pod on Instagram. I don't even know if we're on Facebook at this point, and I don't really give a shit. Because
we are, it's just not updated.
Well, apparently we are, but it's not updated. And quite frankly, who wants to go and check out the podcast where your parents would go check it out? So that's all Facebook is full of, I'm convinced, just parents these days. You can go, and you, apparently.
I know.
Although without Facebook, you wouldn't make my day happy with fun memes randomly.
I know, that's what I'm saying, exactly.
I get the best of Facebook without having to be on that shit sack of a website. Thanks to Bethany. No, I very much appreciate it, and you have no idea how much I appreciate that. So, based on that, Bethany, why don't you tell us where people find you?
Okay, you can find me on Twitter at Bethany Skelton 5, the number 5, and Instagram Bethany RN24. And again, yes, you can find me on Facebook because apparently I'm that person that has to be on there, Bethany Rose Skelton. And yeah, what about you, Jessica? JB Manor.
JB Manor. I have no idea why I said it like that. You can find me. It's because we're delirious and I've just gone through all of that bullshit and my brain's not working anymore because it is insane. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. See, I'm easy. Unlike the rest of you hoes that have 30,000 different places that you can find people under a billion different usernames. You know what? You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Jessica B. manner. Boom. That's it. That's done. I'm a no mess, no fuss.
We can't all be like you, Jessica.
You can. Just
Jesus.
don't try. It's not a bad
shoot.
thing to be. I read books, so there's that.
I know things, and I drink, and I know things.
I drink and I know things, like Tyrion Lannister. That's exactly right. And I know things, and that increases the level of my drinking.
Amen. Especially since we're talking about religion.
How,
Amen.
I was going to say, how apropos. Amen. Hallelujah. Praise Mormon Jesus. Guys,
Oh, God.
Guys, we're out this week. We apologize to any and all of our Mormon listeners. We promise we're not having a go at you. We just had to get there to have a go at fundamentalist Mormons who are not on social media.
Yes. So they can't attack us. We're awful. We're going to hell.
Crucify us. Or review us on fucking iTunes. We are going to hell.
Oh, okay.
All right, guys. We are done for this week, and we'll come back at you with part 2 of the LeBarons and the Lambs of God. And I haven't given you our body count yet. Did you notice?
I know. We're going to save it till the very end.
Dun, dun, dun. Yep, to the very end. Yes, we are.
Tune in.
So, tune in. We'll be back at you with part 2, guys. It was fun. I won't say it was super fun. It was a headache for me.
And one hell of an adventure for me.
It was a month worth of bullshit down a rabbit hole research that I wish I could come out of. But it is what it is. We're going to finish it up for you in the next couple of weeks, guys. So stick with us. We love you so much. Go check us out on Patreon, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.